Here at Ethereal Arts Studio, I'm an artist, you're an artist, we are all artists. The colors that we'll use are black, white, green, blue, brown, purple, and orange. So now let's use a small paper plate and a pencil to trace a circle for the moon in the background. So the first brush I'm using is a 3/4 of an inch flat brush. You can use anything that is similar to that. After that, we can start applying blue from the top down in a horizontal manner. Brush strokes are side to side, and we fill in the background that is outside of the moon until we then approach the moon and paint around it, but maintaining the side to side brush strokes. So I wanted to say how excited I am to paint to one of my favorite films. After John Carpenter's The Thing and Jurassic Park, The Little Mermaid is next on my all-time favorite list. So after we paint blue up to this point, we then move on to purple. So we have to wash and dry the brush really well. Then we apply the purple in the same horizontal fashion, although we can start to blend it with the blue above it. As you can see, we blend it by maintaining the horizontal manner, but kind of going up at the same time. So let's continue to add some purple here with the same brush in the same fashion, and then we will transition back to blue. Now this time I did not wash the brush. You can if you want to, but it's okay. I kind of just skip that step for this moment and continue to add blue until the bottom of the canvas. After we finish the bottom of the canvas, then we can finally wash and dry the brush really well before we then are going to add white. So I dried it really well. Now I have some white paint. Let's add a little bit of white here near where the horizon would be. The horizon is the middle point between the top, which is blue and purple coming down, and the bottom, which is blue and purple going up. So we add some of it and we blur it. We go up a little bit, go down a little bit, blur the white with the purple behind it. So now I'm going to move down to a smaller brush. I have a number 10 flat. If you have something near that size, you can use it and add white, a stronger beam of white light in the center there on both sides. So after only one coat of blue paint, it could be pretty transparent. So let's reinforce it with another coat, starting from the top, going down around that moon again, trying to blend it as best as we can with the purple, doing that up above the moon and below it in where the water is. So now let's let the canvas dry for a good 10 to 15 minutes on its own, or we could use a hair dryer. It'll dry it up in 2 minutes. And let's add more blue to the sky. This time we don't have to cover all of it. We could be a little bit more sporadic here and there. As you can see, it's just to make the sky more interesting. And of course we do the same thing to the bottom here before we wash and dry the brush again really well once again. So now what we're going to do is add a horizon. Let's take some purple paint, a little bit of it, add a couple of drops of water in it, and then wipe off some of it on the corner here so that it doesn't drip. We're going to add a horizon straight through the moon, through the other side. At first it's not too visible. Once it dries, it'll be more visible. And now let's go back to the smaller of the two brushes that we have used so far. We're going to use blue to add some details to the water. These are lines that are horizontal that are meant to show the movement or the texture of the water. We're going to do the same thing with purple, where it's purple. But the purple ones, I want you to make them slightly smaller because they're farther away. So once we add those, let's go ahead and paint the moon white. And I also want to ask everyone to subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications button. And check out all of our other videos as well. Now, I haven't actually mentioned it, although I know it's in the title, but this painting is actually based on the upcoming The Little Mermaid remake, starring Halle as Ariel. So as we paint the reflection of the moon in the water here, let's make sure that we leave a tiny sliver of purple still visible there to indicate the horizon. Okay, so let's do something that's a lot of fun. Let's add stars to the sky. We're going to use a detail brush for that. But first we have to water down some white paint, a little bit only. Add several drops of water though, with any brush that you like. But then we need the detail brush to actually sprinkle stars all over that sky. Make sure that you move your hands so that they're not exactly all the same. Get different angles and sprinkle as few or as many as you like to make that sky very magical, very spectacular. And then we're going to do the same thing to the bottom, though not as many, not as prominent. In fact, once those stars dry, we're actually taking a little bit of blue paint and actually painting over them. They'll still be somewhat visible, but that's the point. You don't want them to be the same as the sky itself, because it's just a reflection and it's all distorted because it's water. And now we can be even more detailed. So here I have yet another brush. I have a number 4 flat brush. Anything that you have around that size, anything that's pretty small, but not exactly a detail brush. Or if you only have a detail brush, that's fine. But we're gonna add more and more ripples, details, movement. Remember, the farther away, the smaller something looks. So if you add, movement into water that's far, make sure that they're pretty small, hence the small brush. Anything that's very closer or that's closer to us looks bigger. But here I am adding movement in the water that's sort of far away. I'm getting a little bit closer. As I get closer and add blue ones, they could get a little bit larger. Okay, so let's make a navy blue. Let's mix a little bit of black paint and some blue paint to make a darker blue, to continue to add movements, waves, shadows, texture to the water. And when we get to this bottom part, we can simply add black by itself to add even more shadows and texture to this bottom part. Okay everyone, so now let's add some texture to the moon. So we could use any brush really. We just have to make a very faint, very light blue, very light, and add some blotches to the moon. Now the only thing is that the blotches in the middle are kind of like wide and like broad, but the ones on the sides are more they're narrower and they're also curved. So now on to the main character. Let's take a brush and add a rock here, right towards the center of the painting. What I used is my number 4 brush. We add the rock, and then we're going to move on to paint Ariel. So it's a series of lines, shapes. This is why I use the number 4. It's pretty small. We won't make something too broad. We won't make something too big that we will then have to modify. Start off small. Paint what is her head on the top of that line. And again, we could then later add or subtract even, but it's easier to add. Although we will subtract, you'll see in a minute. So now we're making her shape, This is her leg going up. Well, her tail, right? It's going up and then down. The bottom part of her tail. And just take your time. Of course, you could always pause the video. Here I'm making her arm that is wrapped around her or holding her tail. And we add a little bit more and more, right? Until we make what is the figure of a mermaid. Here I added her hair. Then I'm gonna do something that is pretty easy. We just dab on her shadow, which is actually her reflection on the water below her. And here is part of her waistline. She has like a fin belt line. And then I'm adding white paint to refine her. To refine her forehead here. I made her neck a little bit more slender and more her more chiseled, her chin, her face. You know, you make it your own. Here I'm adding a little bit of forehead. I add a little bit of black paint, so it's the opposite, to make her resemble more and more the actress that will be playing her, Halle Bailey, who I'm excited about. She has a great voice, that's what I know, and I wish her nothing but the best. And since the film is ultimately for the kids, I hope it's them who really get to appreciate it and embrace it and fall in love with it as much as we did ours back in '89 and the '90s and further on when we were kids. So now let's add some color to Ariel. So here I have my detail brush. Let's add dabs of orange to her hair. And then we can also add brown to her shoulder. And also to her arm, her forearm, and her hand. You can also add orange or brown to the rocks here, just to add some texture to those. And after we add the texture to the rock, we can then mix a little bit of white with green so that we can add the hints of green to her tail. And now let's paint her tail, her fins at the end of her tail. Let's wash and dry the brush again, the detail brush. Let's add hints of white to add a little bit of light, some of that moonlight hitting her here and there. And also on the rocks. Let's add a little bit of a light here to the center of this fin to make it a little bit less flat, less one-dimensional. And after that, we could add a little bit more reflection on the water with black. Make sure that the fin has a reflection. And just perfect our painting before we showcase it. from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for painting with me today. Please share your images with us if you can. Our information is in the description section. Also, check out all of our other tutorials and time lapses, and check out etherealartsstudio.com.